Do you remember Hello Neighbor? It was a little indie game that was groundbreaking, innovative, and just plain cool. It was the most exciting thing that the horror game community had seen since Five Nights at Freddy's, and just in the pre-alpha alone, videos on YouTube amassed hundreds of millions of views in a very short period of time. Hello Neighbor quickly developed a cult-like following and was a commercial success on nearly every level, with eventual spin-offs, an animated series, and even books hitting the market in the following years. And now, after countless development blunders, desperate attempts to gain PR from YouTubers, and ignoring what players truly wanted, the game is a shell of its former self with a comical 38% score on Metacritic. The game's success was overwhelming, and its rise to stardom was extremely quick. But the problem is, its fall was even quicker. The reviews slowly declined, the updates took the game in a much different direction from what everyone wanted, and ultimately, the game became a generic mashup of ideas that didn't go together. And it happened right under your nose without you even realizing it. Before you can truly understand the severity of this gaming blunder, you have to start by trying to understand what the game wanted to be. Even if you don't know much about Hello Neighbor, I can almost guarantee you've at least heard of it. The game first came into the spotlight in early 2016 with its initial open pre-alpha, which was available to pretty much anyone and everyone who wanted to play it. Developed by a Russian studio called Dynamic Pixels and published by TinyBuild, Hello Neighbor was their breakout title, and from the pre-alpha alone, people quickly became interested in what this studio had to offer. The original premise of the game was to sneak into your neighbor's house to investigate some questionable and dubious activities that you saw him do, and to figure out what this friendly-looking suburban dad was secretly up to. There's something weird going on in his basement, and deep down, you want to know what the secret is. Your goal is to sneak around and solve puzzles without being detected, and to uncover the mysteries that your neighbor is hiding. It sounds simple enough, but the real selling point with this game was the advanced adaptive AI that would make the game progressively harder as you continue to inevitably fail at your puzzles and goals. The neighbor pays attention to your playstyle, and he's going to do everything in his power to make sure you don't uncover his deepest, darkest secrets. For instance, if you were to use the same entrance over and over when breaking into the house, he would put up traps and cameras in that area next time you tried it again, which means you had to change up your strategy to continue to make progress on your mission. It was difficult, intense, and oddly scary for how simple these graphics look, but everyone loved it. The story was straightforward and interesting, the puzzles were difficult but possible to solve on your own, the AI was outstanding, the art style kept you on edge, the soundtrack was intense, and the entirety of the pre-alpha made Hello Neighbor stand out as a game with a big future. Because of the perfect balance between scariness, accessibility, and gameplay, Hello Neighbor quickly became one of the most streamed and talked about games on YouTube and Twitch. Creators like Markiplier, PewDiePie, and others began posting videos about the game, which skyrocketed it even further into stardom. And this was just during the pre-alpha. But this insane praise by creators is ironically where the game's downfall begins. The game was relatively short, so within a few hours a streamer, or any player for that matter, could complete the entire game. The insane coverage of the game in the early phases of development set a high standard for what developers expected to see, and they were not going to let that benchmark decline. So they came up with a plan to keep the game relevant, and unfortunately, the plan sucked. And I'm going to talk about that plan right after I talk about the sponsor of today's video, War Thunder. War Thunder is an awesome war game where you can play as more than 2,000 tanks, airplanes, helicopters, and ships in intense large-scale PvP battles. It is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and every single vehicle is extremely detailed and modeled down to the individual components, offering a super immersive experience. I've always liked war games, and War Thunder really sets the precedent for what a good war game should look like. My favorite part being the way that vehicles take damage in the game. It's not like other games where you get hit, your health bar goes down, and you eventually explode. Oh no, my friend, this one is much better. War Thunder is next level, and the damage models are some of the most dynamic and detailed out of any game I've ever seen. Your vehicle will actually suffer damage to individual parts and crew members when you get hit, and the entire experience is super intense. So play War Thunder today on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox by clicking my link in the description. The link will also provide you a large free bonus pack that includes multiple premium vehicles, boosters, and more if you play right now. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. So what was the plan that the developers fumbled so badly? Well, as the game progressed through pre-alpha and into alpha, things were expanded upon to make it more complex and to make it harder for streamers to complete the game in such a short amount of time. At first, this wasn't bad. In the initial versions, puzzles were pretty straightforward. You had to break a window, find a lockpick, and then get a 4-digit code to unlock the basement, all while being chased by the adaptive AI. As the game entered alpha, these puzzles were made a bit more complicated, which was honestly a good thing. The pre-alpha version was great, but for a full game, it would obviously need a bit more to it. In Alpha 1, the simple puzzles remained the same, but with new obstacles and a harder AI. Then, throughout Alpha 2 and 3, some other minor changes were made, with the house being a bit bigger and items a bit harder to find, which actually improved the gameplay drastically. The puzzles weren't too hard, and the main challenge was still centered around that adaptive AI that acted as the initial selling point for the game. Alpha 3 was regarded by many people as the absolute peak of Hello Neighbor. But this is when things changed. As streamers and YouTubers continued to play the game with every new update, they still found it fairly easy to figure out. Because, well, they had thousands of people helping them. So the developers continued to use these streamers' feedback as the core focus for improving the game, which inevitably caused things to get convoluted and the core purpose of the game to be masked under a layer of unnecessary puzzles and mechanics. Remember the previous path of breaking a window, finding a lockpick, and then entering in a code? The one that worked beautifully because the whole time you were being chased by a crazed murderer who made the process much harder? Yeah, by the time that Alpha 4 rolled around, here's what the process looked like. Break into a house, hit a switch to open a door, use a magnet to pull a key through a hole in the wall, flip a switch to open up a fence, unlock the door with the key, use the magnet to pick up a hot crowbar that you can't touch with your hands because the crowbar's hot, throw the crowbar in a freezer, turn on a train, throw something into the gears of the train to stop it from moving, and then parkour all around the annoyingly complex house to get through a series of holes and stuff, and then go back to where the crowbar is to open the door to then enter the code and unlock the basement. This was just a short summary of the actual process, and even though it does sound fairly complicated, all of this was done while being chased by the neighbor, in a house that was a maze of liminal spaces with no rhyme or reason to them. It's one thing if they added all these puzzles, but to add all of that while making the house bigger and making the AI dumber didn't make any sense. Plus, all the parkour and jumping and platforming and all of that complicated stuff took away from the intensity that made this game so popular to begin with. The core gameplay loop that made Hello Neighbor unique was watered down to the point where it became too hard, too complicated, and too annoying to actually play through, and it would continue to get worse the closer the game got to release. Moving out of alpha, the puzzles continued to increase in difficulty to the point where they made no sense whatsoever, and the constantly expanding house and declining AI intelligence made the game into a generic horror game. This was one of the main causes of the quick decline of Hello Neighbor. It was nearly impossible to figure the game out without watching walkthroughs on YouTube, and people were annoyed because of it. The game just wasn't fun anymore. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. The gameplay loop itself was watered down, but so was everything else that made this game so unique. The art style was changed to make it more kid-friendly, the AI struggled to keep up with the complex layout of the house, and the developers began to focus on something that should have been entirely irrelevant: the lore. This game was short and simple, and it had a cool and straightforward story that kept people engaged throughout the gameplay. The story acted as the driving force that compelled players to uncover the mysteries of the house in the first place. It was short and to the point and didn't take away from the gameplay. It was perfect. Then a YouTuber known as Game Theory made a singular lore video on the game. This video summarized the story and the little bit of lore that was found in Hello Neighbor, and it got a ton of attention, amassing over 13 million views. Obviously, these views translated directly into publicity for the game, and of course, the developers loved the increased attention. So while they were diluting the gameplay, they also wanted to make the story more complicated, where YouTube channels like Game Theory could make videos talking about the lore of a game that shouldn't have had lore to begin with. Then they made the story complicated and tried to make it some complex, meaningful, and heart-wrenching novel when, again, there's no point. That's not why people played this game. This did work at first, causing Hello Neighbor lore videos to get tens of millions of views and the game to skyrocket in popularity. And while this does sound good on the surface, it didn't do much because the people who actually played the game didn't really like it, which is why the review score on Metacritic is so bad. But it doesn't matter, because this shallow fame and fortune is actually what would propel Hello Neighbor to become the franchise that it is today. And I'm not exaggerating when I say, this thing is a franchise. And TinyBuild is gonna milk the hell out of it. A prequel game, a multiplayer game, a construction game, a mobile game, an animated series, and even some books were made on the Hello Neighbor universe. TinyBuild was focused on trying to make a puddle seem like a swimming pool instead of actually building a swimming pool, and the cracks would quickly begin to show. This saga culminated in 2020 with TinyBuild basically begging MatPat to make another lore video about their new animated series. They tweeted at him multiple times on Twitter, trying to do anything in their power to get some extra attention for their shell of a franchise, and people began to realize how stupid the whole thing actually was. While they focused on expanding and growing the Hello Neighbor empire, the original game became a watered-down shell of its former self, and almost all of the things that made it stand out to begin with were removed or changed to the point of no return. Now they have a new game coming out at the end of this year, and based on what I played during PAX West and PAX East, I gave it 2 chances, I'm not very convinced that it's going to be much better than the first game. So we'll have to see if they manage to pull it off successfully. The franchise does have a big fan base, but like I said, the game just didn't feel very good. But again, maybe I'm just not the target audience. All in all, Hello Neighbor's story arc is an interesting one, and for longtime fans of the series, it is definitely a complete tragedy. What are your thoughts on the original title? Was it worth it? Was it overrated? Or am I blowing it out of proportion and maybe the game's still good today? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to download War Thunder using my link in the description, and thanks again to them for sponsoring today's video. I will see you guys next time, and peace.